Hi, Mary.
Ready?
Okay, how are you?
I'm handling this.
You're handling it.
Okay, welcome. We're ready to get started. Tyler is joining us virtually. Say hi, Tyler.
Hi, Tyler.
Right on cue. This is Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. Tonight, we've already discussed Tyler is with us virtually. Bill Kennedy is sitting in the audience. We have Nicole McStay, Town Administrator, and Ally Kreutz, Assistant to the Town Administrator. Tonight, we're going to hear from the Community Power Committee on the presentations of actions needed by the Select Board prior to launch. And then after that, we're gonna have a budget meeting at 5:30. So, Tony, take the stage.
All right. I'll move over here away from everyone so we'll have farther to throw things. Well, thank you. I'm joined by Dory Drotman, who's a member of our committee as well tonight. And we seem to have come here quite a few times over the last few months and asked for things. And I think maybe this is going to be the last one for a while. Don't celebrate too much, but hopefully, I won't guarantee it, but I think maybe this is going to button things up a bit. Last month, when we were here, we were asking approval for the selection of the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, CPCNH for short, and we mentioned some of the documents that were being approved and discussed were being amended at that time and being finalized. And so a couple of those documents have been finalized, and we now need approval on them. And then we have four other related items that we'd like to ask for approval on. Before I get into those, though, I'd like to give just a little background and talk about where we are and what the launch schedule is looking like right now. Well, this is not 40.
Try now.
Here we go. All right. This is today, and right now, we, as well as other members of CPCNH, are going before their local governing bodies and asking for approval on these documents. And we're also asking to designate an authorized officer for go, no-go procurement decision and rate product selection that will be forthcoming here on the next item. On January 30th, the Risk Management Committee of CPCNH will meet, and the committee will be there to vote to authorize power procurement to meet target rates. They'll be looking at the current market conditions for energy and basing some decisions on that. Right now, the market conditions are very favorable for us. They've been really high, and that's why electric rates are high. Energy prices have come down somewhat, so we think our timing is going to be pretty good. So unless something drastic changes between now and January 30th, what they're going to be looking at is probably going to be favorable, and that vote's pretty sure to be yes, that we're going to proceed. But we need to authorize an officer who can vote in that on behalf of Peterborough to either go or no go on proceeding with Peterborough Community Power. When all along with Community Power, we've said that if we cannot launch with a better rate than people can get through the Eversource default rate, then we won't launch. We feel really good about that, and so we think it's going to be a go decision, but we need that authorized officer there in that meeting in order to cast that vote.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Tony? When is Eversource going out to re-sign contracts? They do it on a 6-month basis.
6 months. The next rate increase will be next month. It's already in place. It's been approved by the PUC.
Oh, okay, so the rate's already been set?
Yeah, it'll be about 20 cents per kilowatt hour.
So we know what it
It's actually a
is.
decrease.
It's actually come down a little
Slightly,
bit.
yeah.
Yeah, about 2.5 cents or something like that.
Right.
And that'll be Eversource's default rate for the next 6 months.
So that's the rate that we're looking at
So we're looking at it, we want to be sure we can beat that.
Right.
And it looks very favorable for that. Go
And
ahead.
I would just phrase it just a little bit differently, that if we couldn't meet or beat their price, we wouldn't launch.
True,
Because
true.
if we meet it and provide more renewables, in that it would still be a net gain.
Right,
But, so it's a meet or beat.
right, yeah, because we are trying to increase the percent of renewables in there as well. So the coalition, with go votes, they will begin procuring power hedges. Then we move to February 6th. The Risk Management Committee and the Finance Committee will meet to deliberate rates. They'll finalize rates for all products and recommend those to the board for approval. And if you'll recall, we've shown before, we will have 4 rate tiers that our ratepayers can choose from. We've got to select one of those as a default, and then 3 optional rates. So that's what will be involved then. Our authorized officer will then, between February 6th and 16th, we'll have to let them know what our selections are for those rates for Peterborough Community Power. Then on February 16th, the CPC&H board will review and approve all the rates. They'll then notify utilities, in our case Eversource, start mailing the customer notifications, preparing enrollment and the opt-in, opt-outs, all the things needed to get the program up and rolling. We will hold a public hearing within 15 days of when those mailers are sent out. And then April 3rd, the target launch date, customers will be enrolled and power flows. So in order to make all this happen, we're here to ask for approval on a few things. The first of these is to approve amendments to the Peterborough Community Power Plan. With some of the changes in documentation, well, once again, this isn't.
I know.
There we go. Thank you. There are a few tweaks to the Community Power Plan that needed to be made so that it conforms with the CPC&H policies and the cost-sharing agreement. There's also a paragraph where we needed some changes, Bill.
Could we step back just 1 second?
Okay?
We're going to have somebody authorized to go, no-go.
Right.
Is that that person's going to operate as an individual, or are they going to be advised by the committee?
They will be advised by the committee, and I'll cover
Okay,
that
you'll get
in a
them.
minute.
Okay, great.
Good question, though. But there's a section in the plan about net metering. There's concern because currently Eversource, their system is not set up to collect and report all the data that's needed by CPC&H so that they can properly credit net metering customers with what they produce and put back onto the grid. That's in the process, and that's part of the PUC rules that they have to do that. Since their system wasn't previously set up to do that, they're having to modify their system, and they're saying they may or may not be ready when we're ready to have that data for us. So there's a little thing in the plan that has been inserted allowing us to treat anyone on net metering who is currently an Eversource default customer. We can treat them as an opt-in rather than an opt-out. So we don't automatically opt them in and cause them to no longer be able to get credit for what they're generating back to the grid. If that happens, if Eversource is not ready, we'll launch with those people being opt-in. Once we have Eversource's data, it's all flowing like it's supposed to, then we'll go back, notify those people so that they can opt in at that time. And then in the future, any of those people would be treated as opt-out. We're also asking you to approve submission of some additional information to the PUC. December 12th, we received notice from the PUC that our plan had been approved. There were 2 pieces of information that they required, though, with that approval that they said we have not supplied, and they wanted us or instructed us to provide that information prior to launch. So approval of this is just so we can send a letter to the PUC with this information in it. And part of that is, and we've had a little change here, but this says naming our town administrator as the person authorized to request information from Eversource. We had a suggestion late this afternoon, and I didn't have time to change this, but Joel Huberman, who is the other committee co-chair, had understood he could request the data from Eversource. He submitted that request on January 2nd. Eversource came back and said, your town has not authorized you as this authorized individual to request this. So you've got to go back, the town's got to go to the PUC and name someone, and that's what this is, has led to this. But since Joel requested that information on January 2nd, if we name Nicole to do this and she submits the request tomorrow, the clock starts ticking tomorrow on the request, and Eversource has 30 days to respond, up to 30 days. If Joel is the person named rather than Nicole, we feel that maybe the clock has already started ticking on January 2nd, so we'll get the information sooner. It's not the end of the world if we don't get it, but it's better if we do before everything is put together here. So for that reason, please replace this with Joel Huberman instead of Nicole. So we're requesting.
No, you can't have two people, you can only have one person?
It's just one person, yeah. The other item is submission of the URL for our Community Power website. We don't have a website, but the Community Power Committee has a web page on the town's website, and so we're submitting that as the current website for Peterborough Community Power. Once things are up and rolling, there will be another URL that people will go to opt in and opt out and get their usage information and other information. But for now, we're submitting that so that we can comply with the PUC and be ready to launch. Okay, then the third item we're asking is authorization of the town administrator, and we're keeping this one with town administrator, to enter into the member services contract for the complete service bundle, and that is what was added to the cost sharing agreement as Exhibit C. And so we'd like authorization of that with Joel Huberman named as the authorized officer, and the elections on page 19 of the agreement all being yes. And what that's about is delegating authority to the authorized officer to make this go, no-go decision on January 30, and also specify the default and optional rate tiers and set discretionary reserve adders. And those discretionary reserve adders will be what our town chooses to put into the reserve in addition to what CP&H puts in as a reserve. CP&H will establish that, and their reserve will be for rate stability as they're buying energy on the market through active portfolio management. They need a reserve to act as a buffer in that to ensure that the rates can remain stable. We as a town can add an amount per kilowatt hour that we want in there that can be used to build up our own local reserves, and that's what we can use for funding local projects for renewable energy and weatherization and things like that. And that's not been determined yet, but that gives the authorized officer the ability to set those. And I'll talk about it, more authority on that here in a minute. It's also with the authorized officer listed as the principal representative. Steve Walker is the member representative, and Danica Malone is the alternate representative. Steve and Danica are our CPC&H board members and board member alternate. And so they need to be listed on that. And that's just basically to serve as alternates to the authorized officer. And with the town administrator being nominated as the principal executive officer on page 20, will be the person authorized to sign this document on behalf of the town. Okay, and then we're also asking that you approve CPC&H's data security and privacy policy. That's a new document that was included in the board packet. We ask that you direct the authorized officer to seek input from the Peterborough Community Power Committee when specifying default and opt-in rate products and setting discretionary reserve adders. And that's to stipulate that the authorized officer use the committee's input when making those decisions. So to your question, Bill. And then, very similar to that, we're asking that you direct the town administrator to seek input from the Peterborough Community Power Committee prior to exercising their authority as Peterborough's principal executive officer to specify a new authorized officer. And that's for down the road, when and if a new authorized officer is to be appointed, the town administrator would get input from the committee before naming someone on that. So those are the 6 things we're asking, and we've put those in the form of motions that we suggest to you, and I've got another slide with the other 3 on it, but that's what we're asking you to do.
And that's what you sent to us, or I got, I think, on
It was in the
Friday.
packet, yes.
Yeah.
I'm looking right at it. So
Yeah,
you
this
haven't
is-
changed anything from Friday, although you would
No.
like to name Joel Huberman rather than Nicole in number 2?
Yeah, right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise
Which-
everything's the same.
I mean, if his first request was denied, then maybe it doesn't count as the same
It
timeline.
may not, we don't
Because he
know.
wasn't authorized, it'd be like if anybody calls and said.
Right.
Yeah.
Can we do this in one motion to accept all these as written with this one adjustment of Joel Huberman replacing your name as number 2? Or should I read them all?
I think you can move them all as presented with that one edit, if you're all three in favor of doing so.
Well, I do have one question, and that is, the plan is authorizing Nicole to name an authorized officer, but isn't ultimately that the select board's role?
Well, we're asking the select board to name Joel Huberman
Right, I
as the
understand that part.
authorized officer, but
Right.
Nicole will be
Number 6.
authorized to name a new authorized officer in the future when Joel says, I don't want to do this anymore.
Why wouldn't it be the selectmen?
That was what-
It could be, I guess part of this is we've been in front of the select board how many times last year? And this we saw as a pretty minor thing. We felt like the committee will know who, the committee would make a recommendation to the select board, and we're just trying to avoid having to come to the select board.
But I get a nickel every time you show up. I think it's perfectly fine to authorize Nicole, but I don't want to get into a situation where we're fumbling around with administrators and things.
Tyler, you have a comment?
Yeah, I think I felt the same thing as Bill Kennedy. It's line number 6 that I think he's referring to. And why wouldn't we just make that town administrator be, and I only ask this because what if someone's hit by a bus? You know, could it be the select board that selects that person?
Well, all power ultimately comes from the select board in this matter anyways. So if there were to be no town administrator, I think it would automatically revert up, no matter what.
Sorry, maybe it wasn't number 6.
I think that is number 6.
Yeah, you're talking about
Yeah,
number
it's
6.
it's number 6.
Yeah, the replacement authorized.
We're authorized, yeah.
That's right.
Well, actually, this is where the town administrator seeks input from the committee before making the selection.
Oh, right.
So actually, it's part of number 3, where
Principal executive officer,
the,
down the bottom bullet point.
It's the very bottom bullet, I think.
okay, yeah.
Well, the conundrum is that originally we wanted Nicole to be the executive officer,
So, there's 2
So
different
she's-
positions.
but she would be nominating herself.
But the authorized officer is a different thing than what
Is it?
I
Yeah,
believe.
the authorized,
Yeah,
the authorized
authorizing an
officer,
Executive.
Yes.
the authorized officer is what we're wanting to name Joel Huberman as.
And have wanted to name Joel that from the beginning, not replacing.
Right,
Yeah, that's
Okay.
different.
right. Yeah, number 2 is where we're wanting to name Joel instead of Nicole
Right.
to request the information from Eversource and be the main contact with the PUC. That's not what this is down here. The authorized officer that we want to name Joel to also is the person who can do the voting of the no-go, no-go, and selecting the rates and so forth. And then the principal executive officer would be the town administrator who's authorized to execute the contract on behalf of.
Okay, I think I get it.
I mean, do we need to just add a little language to number 6 that says, on the second part of it, where as Peterborough's principal executive officer to specify a new authorized officer in consultation with the select board? Does that make everybody feel better?
Since it's an appointed position, we wouldn't
Actually-
need to go into non-public session, but we probably could. But,
Well, that's not what we need to figure out right this second.
well,
Tyler?
Oh, hi, I'm back, yeah. I was lost there for a minute.
Do you want us to add on number 6 bullet point where the Peterborough's principal executive officer to specify a new authorized officer, which in this case would be Joel Huberman or his next in charge? Do you want to add something that says that she needs to consult with the select board? Or are we even really concerned with that?
No, sorry, I misread that. I see that it says the select board directs the town administrator to seek input on that decision, so
Right.
maybe it doesn't need to change, sorry.
All right. Well, so then I can make a broad sweeping motion to authorize everything in the requested actions with the one adjustment being number 2, naming Joel Huberman rather than Nicole McStay as the person authorized to request information from Eversource under POC 2200. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Great,
Come on.
thank you.
Thank you.
Where's my nickel?
It's coming in your electric bill.
That's right, that's your discount. Your select board discount.
All right, so,
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
what? We have recess?
Chief should be able to.
I have a
Oh, we
question,
do have,
not about this, just about the town.
Okay.
Because I wasn't here.
just one, we have one little piece of business to do first, and if you
Oh,
don't
yeah, sure.
mind. So Jane Bowman has retired as deputy treasurer.
Yep.
And Mandy would like to appoint Leslie Lewis as a new deputy treasurer. That'll be through the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, and then we'll have her included in the slate for reappointments after that, if you're in favor.
Okay. Anyone?
I'll
Bill,
nominate
Tyler?
Leslie.
Sure.
All
Yes,
right.
I'm in favor.
Okay.
Do
So
you need to make a
then,
motion?
Bill just made a motion.
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Is Mandy here? Yes, here she is. And Leslie better be here. She's on.
Sorry to cut you off, I just wanted to
Oh,
write that.
that's all right. I'm just interested,
Yeah, go ahead. Just say your name, don't forget.
my name's Jay Cox. I'd like to know who's in charge of the ambulance fund, who oversees it?
The select board.
Go ahead.
The assessment review notice, is that anything that has to be discussed on the agenda tonight? The assessment review
I
notice?
don't think so, I think it was just in consent agenda, yeah, just for,
It's just notifying us.
All right, so we'll take a 6-minute recess.
Hey.
Everybody to the playground.
We got it, all right, we got it done. Do you have a remote? It's not a problem.
Yes. I want to know who gives the authority to spend the money.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's like, who gives it, well, the budget. I mean, I guess it's, well, as long as something's within the budget, then that's where they would have to, anything that would be outside.
I'm just curious
Yeah,
about.
no, I just want to make sure I answer your
They
question.
had
correctly.
they had a surplus a few years ago, and they. And now they don't have it.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the ambulance fund is.
At least
It's a raw
as much
ball.
as
It's
possible.
fine.
I mean, Lily would be the great person to be able to tell, because I know that if there is, money in the revolving funds, it can't be out.
Oh, sure. Andy brings me.
Going on vacation.
What's the question?
Money in a revolving fund, so her revolving fund has excess, money over its expenditures.
Sure.
Like, if there's revenue in there that's in excess.
Revolving funds don't sunset, it's a fund.
Right, keeps building, right?
Keeps building.
I was just wondering, the ambulance fund a few years ago had a
Some
big
things about
surplus.
the
And they,
electricity use and
over
the array.
4 years, they managed to spend it all into default.
Do they have batteries for it?
I was just.
When did it become a revolving fund? Wasn't it something like 4 or 5 years ago, town meeting changed it from a
It was
special
nothing.
fund to a revolving fund?
Was it an enterprise?
I think it was a special fund, it can't be an enterprise.
Look on her face, no, she hasn't.
Special fund, it might be.
That's what pay as you throw is.
Every time I use it, fine, so.
Sure.
It was very enlightening the first time I heard it.
Balance in the account.
I'm just wondering,
In
health insurance, life insurance,
You know the dollars.
are those in that fund?
Yes, those are taken out and paid back to the general fund because those bills are paid monthly out of the general fund.
So
But there's very few people on the ambulance and fire
they
department
spent
that
$168,000 last year.
Let me just start with the first question. You have health insurance and the life insurance, that sort of thing. There's very few people on the ambulance department that qualify. There's only 6 employees that are considered full-time with benefits.
I am.
The other 70
Sure, to be honest, those were here when I
are
came
just
in.
part-time
I don't know if
employees with
they're
no
new or not.
benefits.
Oh, and I.
Even though some of them are working 30 hours on average a week, for example.
Water bottle by any chance?
Town currently pays at 160, whatever.
Carl said that it might belong to you.
I don't think I'm following your question.
The ambulance, the town.
For the health insurance? No, you're wrong. The ambulance fund is paying for the employer's portion of
All right,
health
we're both
insurance.
hobbling around here.
Pay it to the town.
Yeah, they pay it back to the town, because the town pays it monthly when the bills come in, and then at the end of the year, once all is known
These
with
are
regards
the
to
adjustments to the charter.
what each of those 6 employees' insurance costs were in full, that is then paid back and pays back the general fund. In fact, it's on.
I saw that in the, I wondered what it was.
So that happens with quite a bit.
Transfer.
Yeah, it happens with a couple of our different things. It's, I need my glasses, so
How's it going?
How are you?
the water fund, the sewer fund, the ambulance fund, and the
See,
recreation
they
revolving
scheduled
fund.
snow for the day my
If
brother
it,
leaves
if
down.
it does
Really?
pick up a full-time
Or,
employee.
just, I mean, it's after.
This is what
So, of
has
course,
been.
yeah.
There's no worry about it.
Right, yeah, you don't want to risk the flight being
Enterprise fund,
messed up.
revolving fund, and future revolving fund.
Just like to make sure he's out of town for all the snowstorms.
So they are paying what is owed by the employer. And then
I think Colin's
obviously
gonna be gone, too.
the employee's portion comes out every paycheck.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. My name is Lily Gilligan.
Jay Goff.
Very nice to meet you. I understand your neighbors are Bill and,
Well, I live on the same street, we're not quite neighbors.
so not neighbors, same.
You're close enough, Jay.
You, Carl, have everybody you need here? Yes. Okay. All right, we're back from recess. It is still the 17th of January. Tyler is still with us. Bill Kennedy is still with us. Nicole McStay is still here, and so is Abby Kreutz. We have the Chief Kennard. We have Chief Walker. We have Lily Gilligan, our Finance Director. So over to the Budget Committee, Carl.
Thank you, Bill. So to introduce the Budget Committee, we have, starting in the room over there, Mandy Sliver and Leslie Lewis sitting next to her. And then coming down the table here, we have Ronnie McIntyre, Mary Clark, Rick Lesser, and Andrew Osterman. I'm Carl Mabzino, and I think we're missing one member of the Budget Committee, Al Lenners, and another one is Ronnie Parker. So we do sit in as a quorum. I think tonight we're going to hear reports from budget proposals from the fire department and first from the police department. So, Chief Kennard,
Yes.
want to start?
Sure. Will you be putting anything on the screen or not?
No,
No?
just want to
Okay.
talk through it.
Okay, very well. Most of our increases are occurring up in the salary and benefit category of the proposed budget. In fact, 85.7% of the police department's budget is tied up in salaries and benefits for personnel. The largest increase put forward thus far is on the salary line by $314,358 to be exact. What's in that number? Well, there are several things in that number. The first would be lining up a successor for myself, looking at retirement in probably 3 years from now. So there's salary money there, put aside there, to bring in a police administrator. Hope somebody with experience, hopefully. There would be a process in place for that. But typically what police departments will do is bring somebody in a year or two in advance, and basically it gives them a chance to test the waters. When the day comes for retirement, that individual knows what they're getting into, the town knows what they're getting, the employees know what they're getting. So there's no mystery there. It basically becomes a turnkey operation overnight. So that's one of the driving forces in that figure. Second highest figure within that line item would be the 8.7 merit and COLA. That totals at $97,796. Moving on, the school has requested an officer be placed into the school, which has been done. What that has done is created an open position. So we're gross budgeting for a vacant position for a police officer. Another way to look at that is it's actually offset by an incoming revenue from the school district, but the money has to be gross budgeted. Moving on from there, I'm going to fall in line with town policy on my on-call supervisors. We basically always have at least, we're not large enough where we have a supervisor on every shift. So the sergeants take call per week as being on call in the event a supervisor is needed for an incident. Traditionally, that's been done without compensation. So to fall in line with town policy, the on-call supervisors will be compensated so many hours per week. And off-duty court time. A lot of officers are being called in for court cases when they're off-duty. It basically interrupts an entire day. They have to cancel plans. Everybody is scheduled for the same time on a court date, 8:30 a.m. You may sit around until 3 or 4 in the afternoon before your case is heard. So again, with call-in, much like the water and sewer department, those officers will be compensated. So by the time we're done adding all of these things up, that is actually what's in that 314,358. As time moves on, looking down at the overtime, increase of 58,138. With more tenure with the officers, as time goes on, they accrue more vacation days and bonus days. So those are more shifts that I have to fill. Although we're a 13-man department, once fully staffed, there are only 9 officers that actually cover the 24/7 coverage. Those absent would be myself, the prosecutor, the detective. And as Like with any other department, as salary and overtime increases, so do the payroll taxes and the retirement. You'll see increases there on the payroll taxes, $63.98, $82,453 on retirement. Retirement takes a steep hike every year. That's something that's really out of our control. Equipment, furnishings, and tools. I've got a lot of equipment that needs to be replaced this year, or not necessarily a lot. One being a mobile data terminal. 4 of the cars have onboard mobile data terminals, laptop computers, but they're a specialized computer that has to take a lot of vibration, extreme temperatures, and that sort of thing. They're about $5,000 a piece. I have one I have to replace this year, a radar unit, several radios as well. And as we move a little further down, computer services, it goes up every year with licensing and software updates. Moving on to dues and publications. Publications are law books. That's taking an increase of 1,000. And then rentals and leases, copy machine, postage meter, and that sort of thing, $1,200 increase. When you add all of those up, you're at $487,917. Exactly $100 above the bottom line increase in that category. 2 other areas have taken an increase. Vehicle parts and supplies by $10,000. Cost of tires and other things, miscellaneous parts for the vehicles throughout the year has gone up significantly. Maintenance on the vehicle, cost of labor, looking at a $1,000 increase there, and then cost of gasoline, driving that $85.50. Those are the increases in the proposed budget. The highlights, that is, as I've been instructed to do.
Thank you. I didn't find that highlight to realize you were giving him 3 years.
That's the tentative plan at this point, sometime in 2026.
How long have you been with the town?
It will be 40 years in 2026.
This would be an adjustment.
So,
Any other questions for Chief Gurnard?
yes, sir.
Your retirement as percentage of salary goes down in the proposed budget from 33% last year actual to 31% in proposed. Yep.
This is something that is in my purview, not Chief's. The New Hampshire retirement system's contribution rate for the employer is going down, I think it's 2.14% for police and fire, and just a little over 1% for employees.
Interesting, okay.
They just finished their biannual actuarial evaluation and found that they were overcharging.
That was covered in the memo we sent out at the beginning of the session.
Yes, sir.
Chief, can you flesh out the succession planning a little bit for us? What's involved, who's on a committee, or how that goes? Is there a possibility of internal or external? Just flesh it out for us.
We really haven't gotten that far yet. Basically, it's been a discussion between the town administrator and myself at this point. There will be a process in place. Process has not been set up. It varies from community to community. Some communities will hire an outside resource such as MRI to assist. Many communities will also add in a personnel review board made up of citizens. Maybe somebody in-house that's interested, may not. But the key, the objective is to have somebody in place that works well, and again, make it a turnkey operation overnight.
Thank you.
Not really a question, just a comment, just from a budgeting perspective, because we do budget out so far in advance. I just want to thank you, Chief, for giving us that notice and letting us know, because there is a monetary amount, involved in making sure that we do this correctly. It means that we do need to start planning ahead, so thank you for that heads up and for working it into this year's budget.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you, folks.
I had a question. Can I ask one?
Yes.
What was the percentage of the increase total?
Bottom line?
Yes.
26.
Year to year,
26.8%.
26.84.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Bill.
All right, we have another chief here for us.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Would you
All right.
take over? Chief Walker?
Sure. Thank you. As luck would have it, I'm planning to leave around 26 also, so, you know, just throw that out there. With the good public safety director, I'll just throw that out there. All right, so we'll go over our budget tonight for Peterborough Fire and Rescue, which includes the fire department, emergency management, and the ambulance service. With me tonight, I have Deputy Chief Brad Winters, who started full-time at the beginning of this month as the deputy chief, again, talking about succession planning and looking at that, bringing somebody in full-time, someone else full-time on the fire side with me. And again, succession planning doesn't necessarily mean Brad wants to be the next fire chief, but he can certainly provide for a transition. He's made that abundantly clear on several occasions. We could change his mind in the next 3 years, but who knows. And also Captain John Fahey, who manages the day-to-day operations of the ambulance service. When I go through this today, one thing, just a little caveat in the beginning, I'm not going to talk about retirement increases. I'm not going to talk about the benefits and stuff. Lily covered that the first night. Scott covered that. Nicole covered in the cover memo. So any specific questions you can ask, but that's not part of the presentation here. A little reminder, what we do. So Peterborough Fire and Rescue provides fire service and EMS to a bunch of folks around here. We provide fire protection to Peterborough and Sharon. We also provide emergency ambulance service to Peterborough, Dublin, Francistown, Hancock, Sharon, and Temple. And we're also part of the Southwest New Hampshire Fire District Mutual Aid, which allows us to receive mutual aid from the other communities in the district, which is pretty much all of Cheshire, all of southern part of Cheshire County and the the western half of Hillsborough County. And we also do provide some mutual aid out along with that. And our ambulance service also provides emergent and not emergent medical transports from Monadnock Community Hospital and a few other facilities. But the key thing here really is this piece. We're a service organization, and that is why we exist along with pretty much everything else in municipal government here. A little bit with the numbers. Last year we responded to 3,043 incidents. 526 of those were fire calls. 2,517 were ambulance calls. Within the ambulance we had 1,652 emergency calls and 865 transfers. Break that down a little bit. 76 motor vehicle accidents, but what's also interesting is when you look at this, 143 or a little over 25% of our call volume was to residences, was to individual homes, not people in the street, not trees and wires, not apartments or mercantile or businesses. It was actually to people's homes for the fire department. Ambulance. So, as I said, we had 1,652 emergency calls. 1,430 of those were to our service towns, and by that I'm referring to Peterborough, Sharon, Temple, Dublin, Hancock, and Francistown. 111 of those were mutual aid ambulance calls, and 111 were ALS intercepts. We did 865 interfacility transfers. 659 of those were people transferred to definitive care. And by definitive care, we're referring to a procedure or something the Monadnock Community Hospital cannot provide. It could be something as critical as, a heart surgery, neurosurgery, or it could be merely the fact Monadnock Community Hospital is full, as they are quite often. We get into, now cold, flu, and COVID season, and folks need to go out for observation and care. 206 of those were folks who were discharged to home or rehab. What's interesting about the transfers to definitive care, of the residents that we transferred to definitive care, 217 of those patients were people from our service towns, so from the 6 towns we serve. An additional 304 of them were from our surrounding communities. So if you go out one town, go to New Ipswich, go to Greenville, Ringe, Jaffrey, Dublin, Greenfield, Bennington, and Antrim, you're up to a total of
523 of those residents. So really, when you look at our transfer service, the folks that our transfer service is benefiting are the people right in our own communities here, and the people that we have right around us. So again, what we'll look at tonight, we'll go through the fire department side of it, from the budget perspective, emergency management, and then delve into the ambulance service. Just to remind you, we are a service. Our department, like the other departments, we run as cost centers. You know, we're very fortunate on the ambulance side, we have a revenue stream, but essentially our goal is to look at controlling our cost as we bring that in. That's a typo. It should be 526, no idea where those numbers came from. When you look at our administrative budget, the administrative salary line covers myself and a full-time administrative assistant. That position is currently vacant. We should be posting it hopefully next week. Now that I'm through my budget presentation stuff, I can focus on that and look at that. The deputy chief's position is included in the operations side. We'll be talking about the operations side in a minute, but we have those two sort of main payroll or main pay categories for that. One of the things that, you know, all the rest of the stuff in there, all those costs have increased. You know, our diesel fuel has increased when you get into operations budget, electricity costs have increased, computer services, telephones, vehicle repair and maintenance. We have a pretty robust fleet. We are very focused on preventative maintenance for our fleet for two reasons. One, you know, failure can, you know, literally mean the difference between life and death. And the second part of that too is really maintaining the investment that the town has made in this apparatus. You know, we're in the process of purchasing a new ambulance. It's $450,000 for that ambulance, and, you know, cot and stretcher, power load stretcher system in that. So these are no longer inexpensive things. So what does that operations salary line break down to? Our fire department is, with the exception of myself and Deputy Chief Winters, an all-call or a paid-on-call department, which means the folks that are coming to fire calls have other jobs. We're fortunate that we have a core group of folks that are retired and live in town or work from home and have a lot of availability and some flexibility for things. But the rest of the folks, you know, we have a lot of folks that are really not around 9 to 5. They're only here nights and only here weekends, which is what a lot of other communities suffer from. So a full-time deputy chief's position, these salary numbers that I have in here are inclusive of the COLA merit that is built in. So that's inclusive of that when you look at those numbers. Deputy chief is 2,080 hours, you know, 2,600 hours of folks responding to fire calls. Shift staffing, that refers to the ambulance shift. The individuals who are licensed EMS providers who also work ambulance shifts, we allocate 20% of their on-duty salary to ambulance calls. That's about, to fire calls, to the fire budget. They're doing a lot of fire department stuff while they're there. They're doing maintenance of apparatus, maintenance of the station, responding to fire calls, so there's that cross-allocation there. Fire prevention, look at 20 hours a week. That individual works with myself and Dep Winters on doing fire prevention functions, inspections, permitting, that sort of stuff. That's 800 hours. Company officer administrative time, that is our captain and call deputy and lieutenants and other firefighters who are doing administrative functions within the organization. Weekend duty officer, to ensure coverage on the weekends. We have a duty officer in place, so that's a standby pay. So that officer is expected to be around, be available, and respond to all the fire calls that weekend. And then the last line is something that we added in 2020, which is our stipends. And the annual stipend was actually a very successful program that we came up with that pays individuals up to $300 a quarter if they meet a minimum requirement for call volume, attend all of our trainings, attend all of our meetings, and do that. Training salary line. We have our department or in-house training. That is about 1,100 hours annually of training. Our department meetings, and department meetings cover other things that aren't training. So we bring folks in to do equipment checks and truck checks. We have folks come in and do maintenance on our municipal fire alarm system. So we have those items that come in there. And our external training classes. Those hours vary for that. That also includes training stipends. Individuals who go through and successfully complete and get licensed as an EMT or are certified as a firefighter get reimbursed for a stipend. We went to the stipend system 10 years ago, maybe, around 10 years ago.
Probably closer to 15.
15, and the stipend system was because the town would pay someone to go through, they get through the first 100 hours of their training, drop out of the class, not get certified, not get licensed. The town had invested all this money in training them towards certification or licensure. They don't follow through that commitment. So the stipend is paid afterwards as sort of an incentive for them to follow through and finish the program up. So Fire Department revenue, I wanted to just refer folks to the sheets that what's in the budget sheet for looking at that, because there's no real nuance to this. I mean, our revenue really is two main sources for Fire Department revenue. The master box fee, which is the box that we charge private folks that have fire alarm boxes on their buildings, and our revenue from doing fire preventions and fire inspections. And that's really pretty forward. We have the agreement with Sharon, but that is a formula. That formula is based upon assessed property value, and that's done every year for our fire protection in Sharon. It's not based on call volume, it's strictly based on the assessed value of the property that is being protected. So before we move on to that, any questions about fire?
I have one.
Sure.
Is that part of the 911? Are you talking about the fire, or is that something different?
What do you mean?
Not with the fire trucks go out on a 911 call?
Yep, so anytime, any call for service that involves the fire department. So it could be automatic fire alarm at your house, building fire, car crash, hazardous materials incident, anything like that. That's what this portion of the budget covers.
So none of those 4 other towns pay anything?
Towards fire, no. It's
Towards
only-
fire, no.
Only Sharon.
But we don't respond automatically in those towns.
But you were 911 you do?
For ambulance, you mean?
No, I'm talking about fires. You don't ever go on a fire?
We do. We have mutual aid agreements, so we go automatic aid to some communities. Pretty much all of our surrounding communities, for our reported building fire, we will automatically respond into that community. All those communities also, though, are automatically responding into Peterborough for every call for a building fire. Is that?
Yes, that's.
Okay, all right.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Yeah, and I notice it's also part of the police department. Have we already negotiated with the town of Sharon these numbers?
So we have a fixed contract that includes a formula. The formula is adjusted every year, and then they're notified of what it will be. But we don't have to go back and review that formula on a regular basis.
Okay, so that's off that formula?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chief, I had a question about the 2022 incident number, slightly over 3,000. How does that compare to recent years?
It's right in par with the last couple of years, and I apologize for not building that in. It's right in par. We have seen an increase in fire calls. We had a decrease in inter-facility transfers last year, for whatever reason, over our 911 calls, which was kind of surprising because it anecdotally didn't seem that way, but the numbers showed that it is. I think one of the things with transfers, and I'll cover this in a little bit, I think the reason it seemed like there's more transfers for us is we're going further away now with that. And I'll talk about that when I get into the whole bit with regional healthcare. So emergency management budget, the salary line item in there covers a portion of my base pay as the emergency management director in the town of Peterborough and associated benefits for that dollar amount. Staff development costs cover emergency management related training or other things that we do. We also, every now and then, we've brought folks in. We're up to redo our what's called local emergency operations plan, which is the town's playbook. Should we have a disaster we have to respond to. So last time we hired a vendor to do that. I'm not sure if we'll hire a vendor this year. We weren't overly pleased with how that process went, but we may get there and we may do that. The other thing that is really important with the emergency management budget is it gives us the avenue also by having an emergency management director, having an emergency management program in place to work with both New Hampshire Homeland Security and Emergency Management as well as FEMA on any disaster reimbursements or grants that come up and grant opportunities to come up for that. An example of that, you may remember, although we weren't successful in getting it, we looked at applying for a grant to manage the Fly Pond Dam. So the dam and the road work up on Summer Street, looking at that as an avenue, potential reimbursement avenue for that work. So it does provide us with an avenue to do a lot of those things too.
One place where this becomes particularly helpful is during an emergency. The 2008 ice storm is a great example. One thing that we were able to do is charge everything to the emergency management budget, including highway guys' time, cutting limbs and pulling them out of the road, cost of whatever supplies we needed there. By being able to run it all through the emergency management budget, it was very easy for us to do our reporting to FEMA, where they require very close accounting for everything that was spent.
All right, now the fun part, ambulance service. So just a reminder, ambulance service is a revolving fund. The expenditures out of that fund are under the purview of the select board. The real reason here for going through this is starting last year, we intended to start 3 years ago, but then this whole COVID thing happened. Started last year, we looked at working with treating Peterborough the same way we treat all the other communities, which is, and I'll get into that, into our computation of cost for services, and looking to ask the taxpayers of Peterborough to pay into the revolving fund in the same fashion that the other communities have in the past, in order to move forward and continue to keep that fund whole. So we're going to go into sort of the in-depth discussion of that budget and that budgeting process. We had 2,516 calls for service last year. As I said before, 1,652 of those were emergency calls, and 865 of those were transfers. And for us, a transfer is any call that doesn't originate as a 911 call. So as I mentioned, a lot of those are interfacility transfers. From the hospital's perspective, if we bring someone back to a rehab facility or home, that's a discharge. So our general term of transfers is really anything that is not a 911 call. One key thing for this year's budget, we have consolidated what used to be 2 separate budgets. So with the exception of a training line, every item in that budget had 2 lines. It had costs that were allocated to our 911 or emergency response, and costs that were allocated to our transfer. That goes back to 2015. In a ugly, heated discussion that Nicole and I sat through with our 5 service towns. Barbara Miller was there as the select board chair at the time, as was Pam as the town administrator, and really a longer discussion about how we do it, how it's run, is it fair, is it equitable, making sure it stays equitable. We have reached the point where it really is, it is too cumbersome and too challenging for anybody to look at that and understand it. We are one ambulance service. We have one fleet, we have one crew, we're in one building. You know, we don't have people sitting there waiting for an 911 call and somebody else sitting there waiting for, their pager to go off from an Monadnock Community Hospital. We are one ambulance service. So we've consolidated that budget, similar to, as Seth explained last week, the consolidation within some of the DPW budgets to cover a lot of those things. To digress away from budgets just for a minute here, EMS has become a more critical part of regional healthcare in the past few years. The number of inter-facility transfers in this state has spiked dramatically. And one of the reasons for that is there's a lot of problem with healthcare staffing. I'm sure you folks have all heard of that, whether it's our own facilities in town, hospitals, it's hospitals everywhere. There is a lot of patient shuffling going around. These patients are being moved by ambulance. These patients are, they're going to hospitals that ordinarily, could provide treatment, and the hospital can't admit them, but the hospital can treat them. So we're seeing more and more instances where we're bringing someone over to CMC, specific procedure or test is being done to be brought back to Monadnock because Monadnock has a bed for them, CMC doesn't have a bed for them. I mentioned transfer distances. 3 years ago, if you had said to me we would routinely be transporting people to the state of Connecticut, I would have said, yeah, sure. We've gone to Hartford, we've gone to New Britain, we've gone to, what's the one on the coast? Norwich. Several occasions to get patients admitted. And a significant number of these patients are patients that they need true care. They need, they need abdominal surgery. They need whatever else. And there is nobody closer that can do that. Nobody else that can manage that. So the the role of EMS statewide has become even more critical for that and how we do that. One of the things we look through this and go through this budget, our ambulance budget is up 2.35% from last year. So you look at that as a big number, the 2.2 million, it's only a 2% increase. So I will credit a lot of that to some of the work that John and his staff have done, a lot of the work that Lily has done with getting us in and sort of tightening some things down and looking at that and how we go. Also, just as a quick overview, and I'll get to it in a minute, but when we look to at the allocation for the taxpayers of Peterborough, the allocation for this year is going to be, is requested to be $450,834 in that special warrant article. That's less than 21% of our total service budget. And if you look at it, 19 cents a day per resident in this town to have 2 staffed ambulances, one at the paramedic level, typically both at the paramedic level for that. So, you know, we have that going on. So what do you get in our operations salary line? You get our full-time EMS captain. His base hours are 2,080 hours. Half of that is spent on the truck, half is spent in administrative stuff. Our full-time EMS providers, we have 5 other full-time EMS providers. They work 48 hours a week. Our remaining shift staff is another 21,216 hours. That is just to staff the 2 ambulance crews that are on duty. When you look at that side of it, that does not include third calls, fourth calls, calls that overlap shifts, when we have individuals staying late or folks coming in early to manage scheduled things and stuff that is going on with that. So our revenue, we really have essentially 2 sources of revenue for the ambulance service. We have insurance reimbursements and we have fees to our 911 communities. So our 911 communities, that's done through what we call a blended computation. So the formula is based on population and call volume. So for example, and the numbers can get confusing here because the numbers that are in here are fiscal year call numbers. The numbers that I gave at the beginning are calendar year call numbers because that was the most recent period ending. So for fiscal year, we take and allocate an even percentage of population and calls and calculate what percentage of workload, if you will, each of those communities contributes. So in this case, for the year that ended, or the period that ended June 30th, 2022, Peterborough represented 58.23%, Dublin 10.58%, and so on down. We then take and plug that blended computation amount into a formula we have, which looks at the shortfall between what our revenue is from insurance reimbursement on the 911 side and what the allocated share of delivering 911 calls is. And we do that on a percentage of call volume, 911 versus transfer. We then split out a allocated percentage of capital for that. And for the other communities, we tack on an administrative fee of 10% and an assumption of risk fee of 5% of what theirs is to give you that total amount. So if you look down here, you will see, and I'll come back to this number in a minute, $774,198.09 is what our revenue will be from those communities. Andrew?
This is all costs for ambulance?
911.
No, 911, just 911.
Didn't we do 111 mutual aid calls outside the service area?
Yes.
Is that captured in here?
No. And that's actually a side discussion, but it's something that we're looking at. The calls out are not evenly distributed. So when you look at our neighboring ambulance services, we really have 3 ambulance services that are neighboring service 4. Wilton Lineborough covers the town of Greenfield. Antrim covers Antrim and Bennington. Sohegan Valley Ambulance covers the towns of Greenville and New Ipswich, and Jaffrey Ambulance covers Jaffrey and Ridge. And the Jaffrey Ridge is by far, well, their population is of those 2 communities equal to all the rest of that, but they share a disproportionate number of, or cause a disproportionate number of those calls, and that is a conversation that Nicole has already started and with the town administrator over in Joffrey to sort of look at some of that. But yeah, you did hit on something that there isn't quite an equitable piece of that, if you will. So insurance revenue. So our 5-year average for recovery for our insurance is approximately 52%. So we recover for every dollar we bill to a patient, I shouldn't say insurance, to a patient, we're getting 52% back. What's important to look at here is, and these numbers came from EMAX, the decrease in what is being paid by primary insurance. So if you go back, and we'll just pick the top one, Blue Cross Blue Shield. If you pick Blue Cross Blue Shield, in 2013, we would expect them to cover 40.8% of that billed amount. In 2021, that was down to 21.9. You can't count 2022 numbers because we're still receiving a lot of revenue from 2022. It takes up to a 6-month lag by the time insurance companies, primary insurance, supplemental insurance, patient responsibility. If it's workers' comp or auto insurance, it could take even longer. But the goal of this slide here is really to show you, I mean, if you look at where we are, as an aggregate in 2013, down to now, there's almost been a 25% reduction in what we receive through primary insurance. Andrew?
Why is your self-pay so low? Because this is percent of collection off of billed amount, correct?
Correct. This is primary insurance. Most of our people are insured.
So, but we're writing off, what is that, 82% of our self-pay or bad debt?
So, no. So Medicare and Medicaid, for example, we write off almost 80% of that anyway by contract and law.
Well, right, but self-pay is self-pay.
Self-pay, yeah. Oh, a lot of these people are people that don't pay us. The uninsured, we have a very low return rate on a lot of these people paying us at all. And one of the things that's important, and I get into it a little more in the next slide, but in fact, I'll just jump to the next slide. Our insurance, this is what we're looking at for our insurance reimbursement. So those of you who were at the select board meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago, we looked at increasing our ambulance rates by the 8.7%, which was Medicare and Medicaid's ambulance inflation factor. So working with EMAX Medical Billing, our billing company, that 8.7% increase, even though it is the ambulance inflation factor that CMS puts in place based on Medicare and Medicaid, they're only looking at a 2.5% increase in Medicare reimbursements. So even though they added, hey, you should be able to, you can charge 8.5% more, we're only looking at 2.5% increase in that. On the other side, when you look at our other payers that come in, and we can go back here, I think that's back, yeah, we can go back. Medicare and Medicaid, when you look at the other providers that are in there, commercial insurance, installments, Blue Cross, and so forth, we're looking at about a 1.5% increase in that. So all in all, we're only looking at about a 4% increase in our revenue based on an 8.7% increase in our billing rates. So the other thing that comes into this, and I know all of you are very aware of this, we're probably going to face another recession. And as we go into recessions, one of the things that happens is people tend to not pay their ambulance bills as much because as they're unemployed or underemployed or their insurance plans switch and they have high deductible plans, it's something they simply can't afford. And it takes us longer to collect those fees. We have more people that go to collections and just sit out there in collections, and we suffer from that. As for the revenues, so the insurance reimbursement you see here is a 4% increase over last year's. As for where we are now, as of year-to-date now, we are at about 41% of our anticipated revenue from our insurance companies. For that number, I use June's revenue because December really doesn't count because it just ended and we're still not collecting it. So we're doing fairly well from what Dennis has said at the 41%. We should see that bump up again. There is up to a 6-month lag for a lot of these payments to come in. Andrew?
What percentage of your billing is ALS versus BLS on the 911 side?
Hold on 1 second. Other numbers here.
Basic life support is
Oh, sorry,
BLS. ALS is advanced life support. We think about BLS as like broken bones and things that you would drive yourself to a doctor for. ALS is paramedics, stopped hearts.
So if you look at,
The more,
so if you look at total, so for the $913,438 that was billed so far for 2022, 420, well, actually, let me do the BLS because that's easier. 333,095 of that was BLS. ALS is broken into two different categories, ALS1 and ALS2, depending upon the level of care. ALS1 is $421,451, and ALS2 is $22,038.
Yeah, that's it.
Can I just ask, Andrew, so what is the significance of that question? I just don't understand how that...
So we're talking a lot about raising rates, and the reality is, Chief, if you can go back a slide to your breakdown.
Sure.
Raising our rates has no impact on the vast majority of these numbers.
Right.
So the insurance companies tell you what they're going to pay, and they pay it. And if you don't like that, then you're welcome to not send them a bill. And so the reality is that we are beholden to reimbursement policies outside with very little opportunity to dial up what we're doing. Now, when you're looking at the breakdown between ALS and BLS revenue, we already have the call breakdown. Getting the revenue breakdown is important because the vast majority of our costs are tied up in ALS service. It's very cheap to run an ELS ambulance service, very cheap. ALS ambulance services are a completely different animal. So understanding, are we really getting compensated for making the investments in capabilities and everything else is, I think, important because the service loses money. And how much money is dependent on those ratios.
Yes, isn't the reason that our rates keep going down is because what we're charging keeps going up faster than the...
Because literally what we charge has no bearing on any of these numbers with two exceptions, self-pay and installment pay.
And if you look at Medicare and Medicaid, you actually by law, we have a contract with CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and as Andrew alluded to, they set that rate, and it is a fraction, like I said, even though we increased the rate by their inflation factor of 8.7%, we're only seeing 2.5% increase in our revenue in that, from those calls. Yeah, we're completely beholden to them, and they are a significant percentage of our residents around here. Because again, pretty much anybody over the age of 65 is going to be on Medicare, and the various Medicaid administered plans cover a significant number of our population, either in the nursing care facilities or just the residents in our communities.
Are those rates set at the state level for Medicaid?
The reimbursement rates for us are set at the federal level for Medicaid, but they're administered by the state.
Yeah, Chief, I was just curious on the Blue Cross Blue Shield 2020 and 21, 31 to 21, was there any specific reason for that precipitous decline?
It very well could be that as our rates are going up, they sort of have a threshold, like we're not going to pay any more than this. The thing that's important to realize with a lot of this is we are not allowed to, so for Medicare and Medicaid, if you are a Medicare patient and we bill you X dollars and Medicare says this is worth $500, says it's $500, we cannot bill you for that difference. For the other insurers, the private insurers, we do bill for that difference. So we look to collect that difference. Some Medicare and Medicaid patients, we will get the difference. Some supplemental insurances will cover a percentage of a difference or a different amount. They'll maybe make the mileage amount whole compared to what CMS will pay. But for your private insurer, so as you look at this decrease in this insurance, the other side of that too is a lot of your bill now, your cost is, the insurance company is transferring the cost back to the individual. And looking at that, the other side that's come out of this is a lot of insurance companies now, or a lot of individuals now have insurance plans that are what are called the high deductible plans. So it lowers your premium, and the assumption is you're going to stay healthy, not need the service. If you need the service, you get a very high initial deductible. One of the things that we see too is we see, if you look at the revenue side, we see a decrease in revenue during the January, February, March, April timeframe for the calls billed during January, February, March, and April, because people are reset, the deductible resets January 1. Then you start to get later in the year, people have met their deductibles, so insurance companies are paying more, and we're getting higher reimbursement through the insurance company, so we're not relying as much on the individual to have, save that $10,000 for it. And that is quite a bit, of difference.
Did you have a question, Carl?
No.
Oh, okay. Chief, what is the process for trying to recoup the difference from the private insurers?
So we send the bill to the individual. So our billing company, Emacs Medical Billing, will bill the individual. If they have insurance info, they'll bill the insurance company also. For individual differences, they will work with the insurer. They'll help the individual. A lot of times, and anybody who's ever had to deal with an insurance company, their first response is, we're going to deny this claim. Mm-hmm. And then, so Emacs will work with the individual to try to get the insurance company to pay as much of it as they can. And then once there is that, you've hit that hard ceiling, then the patient's responsible for that balance, usually. Again, with the exception of Medicare and Medicaid. So it's up to the patient to do that. We also work with Monadnock Community Hospital, and they have a medical hardship program, so anybody who comes in and can't afford the full cost of their health care, they can work with the billing office of Monadnock Community Hospital to determine eligibility for discounts. So it ranges from 25% to 100% discount based upon your financial situation and the costs associated with that. So that also, part of that is written off when we do that. Individuals who do not pay are sent to collections. We have a medical billing collection company we work with on that. A small number of individuals we will take to small claims court. Some of your insurers, Blue Cross is one of them, Anthem, will quite often send the check to the individual and then leave it to the individual to reimburse us. Not everybody reimburses us. And not everybody does it out of malice. We have a lot of these folks that come through and bills are coming in, checks are coming in, they're paying bills. And at some point in time, the checks stop coming in and the bills don't. And they're trying to do it. So you look at, some of these installment plan folks are people who are on plans to, repay us, either money that they owe us initially or money that was sent to them by their insurance company that they didn't immediately turn over to us. So we have that, those different pieces fitting in there. Andrew, sorry.
Sorry.
Does Emacs services hit your ambulance administration services line?
There is a line in there for ambulance building. Where is mine? You don't want to have to use the glasses version. That is... Does that hit, or is it just merely just taken against the revenue account? I don't remember that, Lily.
I'm sorry, what?
The money we pay Emacs to administer the billing.
That would be the services line in your administration budget.
It is the services line, okay.
Yeah, their bills are between $8,000 and $10,000 a month.
And then the last thing for discussion I wanted to end with, I know the members of the select board all had an opportunity to see this. I don't know if anybody delved into the packet. But on December 11th, we transferred a Jaffrey resident from Monadnock Community Hospital, he was in the ED there, to CMC. And he sent this note to us, which I forwarded to Nicole and the board, to the Peterborough paramedics. I wish I could remember your names. It was Dan Heffernan and Ed Burke. I want to say thank you for saving my life to the paramedics who transported me from Monadnock ER to CMC during my heart attack. your amazing care, the way you're able to comfort me, assure me that things would be okay, made this whole ordeal a little more bearable. After my heart attack, I had a cardiac arrest at CMC. Because I was there, they were able to respond within seconds to save my life. We cannot thank you guys enough. So again, when you look at the transfer side of that, it isn't just our 911 service to our residents and our neighbors that, makes a difference, but it is the transfer side also is a big impact on folks. Andrew?
On your transfer, do you have a breakdown of revenue for ALS, ALS1, and ALS2?
I do. Actually, I do. I may not have that right here, because we were focused on the 911, but I can get that.
While he's looking for that, one thing that he didn't cover in this is that not only does the ambulance service support the community, of course, and there's no question about that, and the residents in the community, but it also supports the hospital and the retirement communities in town who rely heavily on the services that the ambulance service provides, making sure, like he said, that patients have that definitive care. Without that, MCH cannot operate fully as the critical access hospital that it is today for this region.
Does MCH provide any revenue to the town to support that?
No. It is patient billing.
Yeah, patient billing. It gets very tricky with them paying us to do stuff like you get into.
That's not true.
I'm sorry, that's not true.
There's a
$15,000.
Yeah, there's a donation, yeah.
$15,000 pilot that they pay.
Yeah. That goes back.
But that's a different agreement entirely.
Actually, you may even have predated the transfer service.
Yeah, it does, actually. I think that was put in place, I want to say the very early 90s, when they first established.
I can get that for you, Andrew, I don't have that.
Payment of taxes.
I had one question about the 911 calls from Peterborough. 800 seemed extremely large from everyone else's. Can you pull up that slide again?
Sure.
I'll find it.
Sorry, we're both clicking.
Yeah, I mean, the other town is 130, and we have 932.
Yeah, so a couple things that make Peterborough different. We have 4 assisted living facilities. We have a long-term nursing care facility. We have Route 101 and Route 202 that bisect our communities. We have several large employers, including Conval School District and New Hampshire Ball Bearing, that contribute significantly to the population numbers and the call volume of that. I mean, the other part too, if you look at this from a total call perspective, we are, over half the population of that, or close to half the population of that service area.
I mean, have you got a breakdown of that?
What do you mean?
Those 932 calls?
Yeah, I can, how, Claxon versus medical versus?
Yes.
Yeah, we can create that,
What exactly are you trying to answer?
I'd just like to see where, what's going on with them, 932 of them.
There's only so much information that we can give you because there's a lot of protected information there, so we wouldn't be able to give you street addresses. We might be able to give you some very general information on those calls. But the calls are real. If you have a scanner at home, you can listen to 24/7 those ambulances going out.
Is that Peterborough population strictly residents, or would the fact that, we have these big employers?
That's just residents, yeah, that's just residents, yeah, that number is.
Number that you're serving.
Oh, it's probably, the daytime population is probably significantly higher. Well, I shouldn't say that, I don't know how many people leave to go to work, not a lot probably.
Like you said,
Yeah, the school district, the hospital, even our box stores, you look at, Shaw's, CVS, job lots, the small box stores. The small box stores. Shoebox stores, there we go. Kind of like shoebox stores.
Very good. Given that the merger is not going to happen between MCH and Dartmouth, and given the given structure of the critical access hospital, is there anything happening in the next 3 to 5 years at MCH that would impact transfers in terms of, are they able to take on, provide more services to patients
I think one of the things that we've seen in, Captain Fahey and I were in a meeting about the whole transfer thing, and I don't know if you're familiar with Vicki Logery, who's the Vice President of Nursing up there. One of the things Vicki mentioned, and I talked about, is more of these hospitals are, in the old days, if someone needed interventional radiology, you'd send them over to CMC, they do the procedure and admit them. They're no longer admitting them. So if that patient's at Monadnock, they need the ambulance ride to CMC, have that procedure done and sent back. In addition to procedures, there's a lot of diagnostic testing now. Again, same thing with that diagnostic testing. We will take, Monadnock Community, all hospitals, CAT scans. So your CAT scan machine, their CAT scan is, CT will go down at times, MRI will go down, or the MRI is planned swap outs for maintenance. When that happens, we'll take a patient to Cheshire Medical Center to have that procedure done and bring them back, or to Concord Hospital and bring them back to have that done. So they're still a patient of Monadnock Community Hospital, but they need to go somewhere else for either diagnostic testing or some kind of a service.
But you're not seeing more in-house capability in the near term at MC?
I mean, I know, and again, they're trying to rebuild, I shouldn't say rebuild, that's not the right word. I mean, they're strengthening orthopedics, for example. They're strengthening orthopedics. Again, this is anecdotal. We haven't taken out quite as many orthopedic stuff in the last month or so as we had previously, but again, a lot of that's hit or miss. The surgeon could be available, but if there are no beds to admit somebody afterwards because, norovirus has run through the apartment complex, then, that's where we are. And that's really the thing people have to remember with Monadnock Community Hospital is it is a critical access hospital. They are capped at their census. They've got a very active birthing suite. Birthing, the mom and the baby count towards their census. So if they've got a busy baby weekend and they've got 6 or 8 people in the birthing suite, that's 6 or 8 less people they can have up on med-surg. So there's a lot of that give and take with the critical access hospital. But Nicole does bring up the important point about that, the relationship there. Andrew.
Ambulance companies don't typically, unless you're steward, don't really have the ability to push a commercial payer to negotiate a different.
Correct.
Hospitals can, and they do, and that's why we see multiple hospital systems, including Cheshire, spinning up their own ambulance service. So given the fact that MCH could get paid significantly more money for doing the same amount of work, we ever looked at folding the ambulance service into MCH so they can get paid? Although it's never been discussed directly, they balk pretty much anything to do with that. Portsmouth Hospital is an example. So Portsmouth Hospital now does their own transfers. Portsmouth brought theirs up because they have two standalone EDs. So if they treat someone in their ED and then move them into their own bed, there is no insurer that will pay for that because it's within their system. So they now have their own ambulance to do that because they were losing money, if you will. I don't know, and I don't know what, for example, what Blue Cross's negotiated rate would be for a BLS transfer. I don't know what Blue Cross would pay. I don't know if they pay significantly more than Medicare or Medicaid. I honestly don't know the answer for that. So what, for where that would be.
Ronnie. My question is going to be long and convoluted.
Thanks,
maybe we can get this done.
Do we have any other questions first?
If I may, could we return to the expense budget? And under ambulance non-operating.
Can you just give me what page you're on?
I'm on page 22.
Thank you.
And again, I'm asking these questions so I can try to understand better exactly how this revolving fund is working. So bear with me, please. This is for my edification. Transferred to general fund is $124,438. That's money going to the town, am I correct? Lily?
That is payment for the employer-owed portion of the health and dental insurance for the employees. There are 6 full-time employees in the ambulance department. Every month, we pay the health insurance bill out of the general fund, out of one account for the general fund, no matter what department you work in. At the end of the year, any monies for individuals that work for sewer or water enterprise funds or the ambulance revolving fund, I calculate the employer cost and pay that back to the general fund, and it comes in as revenue.
Got it.
And that revenue is seen in the finance director's section of the revenue sheets on page 2 of the revenue budget. And you can see that the numbers are the exact same for transfer from ambulance, $124,438.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, that clears that up. Then if we look at the bottom line of the ambulance revolving fund, the bottom line is $2,208,542.
Yes.
I'm looking at the bottom of page 22. And if we go to the revenue page 1 of revenues, we see that the money coming into the revolving fund is $2,047,212. Lily?
The ambulance fees, service fees, the estimate that was given by EMAX when I was putting this budget together is lower than the Chief Walker's slides this evening showing the new anticipated fees coming in that take into account the newly adjusted fee structure, increasing it by 8.7%. So I would need the breakdown of how much the dollar figure hits 911 versus transfer service, but looking at it quickly, it appeared to be about $250,000 more than is projected in your revenue budget right now.
All right.
Carl had asked that, and I forgot to mention it, because Willie and I had spoken about that and worked with Dennis.
So that leads me to my final question, and that is, what are we again going to have a warrant article on the town warrant to put money into the ambulance revolving fund? And what's the amount of
That dollar figure is on your revenue sheet, and it says Peterborough cost of service, $450,834. That will be the amount of the warrant article based off of this calculation computation right here up on the screen.
Thank you very much. You've answered all my questions.
You're welcome.
That wasn't that bad, Ronnie. Thank you.
You're welcome, Chief.
How much are the 4 other towns paying?
The 4 other towns, it's right
Oh,
there.
Yeah.
So 325,000? Did I do the math right? Yes.
What
Yeah.
was the ask for last year?
The ask for last year that was granted at town meeting was $328,738. The year before that was $400,000 to buy ambulances. And it also included $50,000 in FY '22 as well as FY '21 that came out of the fire station department's budgets listed as cost of ambulance $50,000. That's what the community had been doing previously.
And let's not forget that a few years ago, we had to go to town meeting with a special warrant article to take $700,000 out of the general fund balance to buoy up the ambulance service because it had spent through everything during the pandemic. One of the reasons why you're going to see a lot of variation is because there's a lot of variation in expenses, but we want to make absolutely sure that this doesn't happen again. So we're looking to make sure that we're meeting all the expenses and that any excess revenue that the ambulance service earns is going to go into that fund balance to make sure that we don't find ourselves in that incredibly uncomfortable and unfortunate situation.
So does it appear we're going to be doing something like this warrant article, $400,000 again and again and again?
On an annual basis, yes. Unfortunately, that's, I say this a lot, and my directors are probably getting sick of me hearing it, but, we're a government, we do the things that unfortunately the private sector can't find a way to make a profit at, but still need to be done. This is one of those things. It's in a rural area running an ambulance service simply cannot be profitable, especially with the way that insurance reimbursements have declined over the year. Even just over the 12, 13 years or so that I've been involved in this, the reimbursement rates have dropped dramatically. And costs continue to go up. And then to make matters even more challenging, we're competing for the staff with all of the other healthcare agencies in the area. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge for these guys to keep it going, but they're doing a really great job. They're providing a service to our community, our greater community, and our healthcare industry that absolutely needs to be provided.
Is there some way we can avoid the process of going through a warrant article and putting it into the budget?
No, we can't, because these are funds that are being transferred from tax dollars to a revolving fund, so it has to go to special warrant article every year.
What's the current balance in the ambulance report?
Lily?
$147,860.80.
Not where we want to be.
Yeah, this service, I mean, they're talking about we have to pay for it. But they're talking about building a new fire station. This fire station's going to support this hospital in these other towns. And who's paying for it? Peterborough.
Well, the other towns will also pay a share of it.
I mean, they're paying nothing now.
It's the cost of the service. The cost of service requires overhead. So some of that overhead cost is going to be billed out to the other communities, just as it's being billed out to all of the people who use the service.
And what's our bond gonna be, $2 million a year?
We're not even close to knowing that
That's a
number.
whole different conversation.
That was just a guess. But I mean, at 300,000, it's just a fraction of it. I mean, this is a quagmire that the town's got into.
I think it's helpful to distinguish between the 911 service, where the residents of Peterborough want to be able to pick up a phone call 911 and have people show up, and the transfer service. The transfer services are provided by for-profit ambulance companies that do state business. We have multiple companies that service Peterborough. If your concerns around hospital or EMS operating costs, focusing on the things that we don't have to be doing is probably more helpful than focusing on 911, which I think you're going to get a lot of consensus on doing.
No, 911, I agree, we need it, but I'm talking about the other ones, because it expands what we need, the size of the hospital, the fire station we need.
That's actually a good question. How many ambulances do we have right now?
5.
So we physically have 5 ambulances. 4 of them one's considered to be a mechanical spare. We have 4 that are undercover, ready to go, fully stocked at the ALS level. We have 2 of them staffed 24/7, 365. That third ambulance, do you know off the top of your head the number of third calls we've had? Sorry, put you on the spot here.
I would have to look it up.
Yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's, but we multiple times a week had that third ambulance on the road. Typically it's for 911 calls, as opposed to additional transfers. And then having that additional ambulance ensures that we always have 3 ambulances ready to put on the road if we have a mechanical problem or something else that goes down.
So we have 2 fully staffed rigs.
Yeah.
Then we have a backup spare, so that's a third rig.
We have two fully equipped, ready to go. We have 4 fully equipped, ready to go out the door. People can climb in them right now and take them on calls.
But for transfer services, I think it's starting in March, you have to have a full EMS crew to do a transfer, correct? So the limiting reactive.
What do you mean?
So state regulations, which have been kicked out because of COVID, are about to expire, say that you can't do a transfer without 2 EMTs in the bus.
You can't, so actually you can't do anything without 2 licensed providers.
But there was an exemption for that. Well,
There is now. The COVID exemption allows you to have 1 non-licensed person in the ambulance for anything.
Right. So I guess my question is, if it's literally impossible because of the staffing limitations to ever take out more than 2 ambulances, beyond having the mechanicals, well, you just said you staff 2 crews.
We staff 2 crews in the station 24/7.
Right.
We routinely have that third ambulance on the road with either myself and the captain when he's working his day shift, with people that have responded from home when the pager goes off because the other 2 ambulances are tied up on calls. We routinely have 3 ambulances on the road at a time.
In comparison to some other communities, when they have those second or third ambulance calls where they require mutual aid, we very rarely rely on mutual aid ambulance services.
How many mutual aid calls are responded to in Peterborough? Or in our service area?
Did we go to,
No, how many times do people come in from mutual aid?
the last calendar year, we had 3. And 2 of them were during the same incident where we had an ambulance, a ladder, and a tanker in Francistown of a building fire.
So, I mean, it's a good question that Andrew brings up.
Yeah.
You know, if this is the part that isn't strictly necessary, you know, can you make a case for keeping the transfer service going? I think that's kind of what you were getting at, right? It's discretionary whether we have a transfer service. We agree we need a 911 service, so make the case for the transfer service.
So if I can just, or first of all, I'll defer to Carl, because we're digressing away from a budget discussion now and getting to an ambulance operation discussion, which is something
it's part of the budget.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, it is and it isn't, you know, I mean, it's not part of the discussion tonight. I don't think, I mean, I'm passionate about this, I'm happy to talk about it, you know.
Discussion about the replacing the ambulance service is really not the topic
No.
tonight.
Yeah.
We're talking about the budget, and it's really not affecting that. So
Well-
maybe we should take this up with
I think it's an interesting point to raise because,
I'm not against
well,
having a
but,
transfer service.
but I think it's interesting to point out that there are only 6 other fire companies that do transfers in the state of New Hampshire, according to New Hampshire state data. We are the only ones south of the White Mountains, other than Concord Fire. So this is very atypical that we do this.
I think it's also important to remember that a fair chunk of the revenue that we receive is transfer-based, not 911-based. That the percentages are deeply skewed. So the transfer service, as it were, paid for itself. It's the whole 911 service, but the transfer operations pay for themselves, where the 911 operations really do not. And so for a long time, the transfer service has been helping to subsidize those 911 calls for the town of Peterborough. And I think for these guys, it's very difficult for them to tell them apart, because you still have a patient in the truck that is receiving service. It's become even more critical since, you know, as they've said, they're taking people all over the place to get routine procedures even now. So it's becoming harder and harder as we go to separate the 2 out. What it really comes down to is what is the level of service that Peterborough wants to provide to those patients. So if, you know, we jump into the way back machine to before the town of Peterborough operated transfer service, we were relying on a private service that was out of the city of Nashua. And so MCH, when they had a patient that needed to, you know, receive treatment in another facility, was calling the city of Nashua, or calling a service in the city of Nashua and saying, hey, can you come out, pick up this patient? And they'll say, yep, we should have a crew available in 3 hours. And we'll drive the ambulance out there to pick them up and then take them to wherever they'll receive that definitive care. And that was what the routine was, until that private service said, we can no longer make this work. It's not cost effective for us to have an ambulance out of our service area for so long. We're not receiving enough from Medicaid, Medicare to make it work. You know, and MCH said, okay, well, you're going away. Let's approach the town of Peterborough, since we are operating the ambulance service in the local region. And Pam, in her infinite wisdom, said, let's try it out and see how it works. And so working with Chief Lennox, working with the staff that we had in the ambulance at the time, was able to meet that demand. And we've been able to continue to do so. And it's worked out. It's been very beneficial. I think it's been very beneficial to the taxpayers of Peterborough over the years, because that's a significant amount of money that we are paying, but it's not the full expense of running the ambulance service. And if you look at the actual call breakdown, and if you were to actually cost out the number of calls generated out of Peterborough that are being responded to, it's a dramatic savings over what we see
Wasn't
otherwise.
hard. He asked a question.
What is the revenue that we get from doing transfers?
1
What is the revenue that we get from doing transfers? 1 million? 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 1 milli
We have a breakdown. We have that right there.
I have it right here in front of me.
If you don't, I definitely have it. We get a monthly report from
Yeah.
EMAX Medical Billing that divvies it all up.
While you're looking for that, Chief, I'll answer. In FY '21, we've received $840,000. In FY '22, $842,000. And this year, we are budgeting to receive $885,000.
So that means that's gonna come into the general fund?
No, that supports the ambulance revolving fund. because
Yes,
that's
so
where all
none
the
of it
money's
goes
being
to the
spent.
town. So the town didn't make any money.
But the town
town's
didn't
not
have
meant
to
to make
pay
money.
for it. The town didn't have, because we received that revenue to the ambulance service, the taxpayers don't have to pay for that full cost of the ambulance service. They're paying a small portion of the cost that it takes to run a $2.2 million ambulance service.
We wouldn't have a $2.2 million ambulance service if we didn't have that.
Well, and again.
And I heard the transfers didn't make money this year.
I'm not sure where you heard that from, because they absolutely did.
And again, I apologize, Carl, because we'll continue to get down this rabbit hole that we said we wouldn't go down. But if I could just add one other thing to piggyback on what Nicole said. Not to bore people with numbers and the rest of that, but one of the realities of any emergency service, whether it's law enforcement, fire, EMS, is this is not a linear business. We can't predict when calls would happen. So you look at the 2 staffed ambulances that we have in our station, even if we were just doing 900 calls a year, we would struggle to meet those 900 calls a year with a single staffed ambulance. Because we'd be relying on people hanging around town that have nothing else to do except listen to the pager, go off and commit themselves to, an hour or 2 for an ambulance call. So it would be very challenging for us to serve those 938 calls with just one ambulance staffed in the building. So if you look at the need to continue to have that second ambulance, and again, looking up here, the one slide, I think I listed it. If you look here at the call volume, we are 67% of that call volume is the town of Peterborough. Nicole's going to shoot me for using this phrase. In essence, there's an element of meeting that demand with excess capacity. When you look at that, in doing that, yet you look at the revenue stream that creates both from the reimbursement from the insurance companies and from those towns to offset it. And to an extent, the same thing is through the transfer service. Emergency response, 911 is our priority. We will never commit both of our, one exception, we will never commit both of our trucks to transfers out of Monadnock. The exception being a true life-threatening emergency. Somebody's having a STEMI, needs to be in a cath lab. Somebody has a head bleed, needs to end up with, in surgery somewhere. Yes, we will, that is a 911, akin to a 911 call for us. So again, the transfers that we are doing are being done around our 911 calls. So it's not a simple math problem to break this service down and break down the interrelationship between the individuals, the vehicles, the revenue, the costs, and so forth, because they're all happening simultaneously. The other thing that the transfer service did for us, which has made a huge difference, and again, it's not some of it goes to billing, but also in quality of life and patient outcomes, is the transfer service forced us to always have a paramedic on duty, because a significant number of the transfers that go out of Medina Community Hospital are going out at an ALS level. So prior to that, we had, most of you here probably know Laura Norton. Laura Norton was one of the town's original paramedics. She was pretty much it, her and Tom Dardis, and that was it. It wasn't until the transfer service started that we brought those patients in, we brought those providers in at the paramedic level. Again, I apologize, I'm on a roll here. The other side of that too is, because we have paramedics, we talked about the transfers, but it also gives us the ability to quite often bring those patients to the hospital that is providing that definitive care. They're not having to stop at Monadnock. And that's why when you look at those numbers, 111 of those calls last year were ALS intercepts. That's services that do not have a paramedic calling for our paramedic to provide that level of care. And that's a pretty high percentage of calls. So again, it's not a simple discussion to dissect these pieces, figure out where those individual costs lie and where those individual benefits are. I'll be quiet now, sorry.
Andy?
It's two questions, so wait till I get to the second one before we get to the first one. Hopefully they're just yes, no.
I promise.
When I moved to town 20 years ago, my husband is a paramedic. He's a 30-year veteran of the fire service. He does not work in Peterborough. He works in the southern part of the state. When we bought our house in Peterborough, he obviously investigated the level of service that was in this town, and he said to me, "Oh my gosh, don't get hurt at home. Call me at work. I will come get you. You'll get better care." Sorry to lure it into Doc. That's not a dig against that. He does not say that anymore. He is very proud and very continuously impressed by the level of service that Peterborough offers to this day, and continues to advance and be progressive in the state of New Hampshire and in this community. So now he is very confident that if I get hurt at home, that I should definitely call 911, if not text Chief Walker. Do you think that that increased level of care is directly related to the fact that we added a transfer service at one point? And I said don't answer like that. And if we got rid of it, do you think that level of care would decrease back to where I originally moved here to?
I will let John defer to that, but the one thing I will say is, one advantage we have is, for whatever reason, our EMS providers like doing cool medicine stuff. And, you know, from there, I'll let John pick that up.
So I would very confidently say that it would lead to a degradation in the level of service that we can provide. Those intangible benefits that the chief talked about, the competency of our paramedics, the ability to go to definitive care, those are things that are all supported through the transfer program. I can tell you some of the most difficult patients that I've had to manage in my career here have not been in the field. They are the things that the physicians at Monadnock are trying to stabilize, and it's not successful. And we are the ones that have to take that stuff out in the snowstorms and everything else to get them to the ICU level care or the definitive stuff that they need. So the short answer to your question is very much, yes, I would think that that is the case. Because without the exposure to those types of situations and those types of patients and managing them for these long distances, we lose that exposure to that aspect of medicine that also benefits our 911 patients.
Thank you, Chief. Bill, do you want to, the select board approve the minutes from last time?
I just want to make a comment. I really want to thank you guys for making a really detailed, nuanced explanation to a question that I think everybody has. I don't think it's a rabbit hole. I think it's actually a question that should probably come up every year or 2 years, because there are people listening at home, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I have a motion from the select board to approve the minutes from, what week?
January 10th.
January 10th.
I'll make that motion. So moved. Right, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, and we have a motion from the budget committee to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second? Second. All right. Any discussion on that? This time when we vote, hold your hand up, because we try to record in the minutes what the actual vote was, and the camera doesn't actually catch everybody, so hold it up and we'll take a quick look around. So all those in favor of approving the minutes? And that's unanimous. Thank you. We have a motion to end the meeting. Do we need one?
So moved.
Second. Finished. Thank you.
Easy motion to make.
Yes.
People satisfied.
Thank you, sir.
That's 1918.
Sweat on your brow.
Yeah.